Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I bought 6 quiet acres to build my dream home, I thought I was leaving the madness behind. No rules, no neighbors, just peace. Then came the letters, the lies, the fake maps, followed by trespassers in HOA vests. They wanted my pond. What they got was war. When I first bought the property, I thought I was finally done with people telling me what I could or couldn't do on my own damn land. 6 acres, private, quiet, no HOA. It was supposed to be the perfect slice of Missouri to raise my daughter on the weekends, invite friends for cookouts, fish a little, maybe even die here someday. I cleared that land with my own 2 hands. Hauled out rusted tractor parts, busted up half-collapsed fencing, dredged the pond myself with rented machinery and stubbornness. I designed the house, poured the concrete, bolted the beams. Every inch of it was mine. So you can imagine my reaction when I got a letter telling me I wasn't allowed to use my own pond after 6 p.m. It came in a plain white envelope with a Clearbrook Shores HOA logo printed at the top. That stylized wave and sun emblem I had learned to side-eye the moment I moved in. I wasn't part of their HOA. My parcel bordered the neighborhood, but I'd bought it in a tax auction fair and square. The legal boundaries were clear as day, but the letter didn't come from the county. It wasn't from code enforcement or the sheriff. No, it was from the Welcome Committee, as they called themselves, and it read like a warning dressed up in politeness. Dear Mr. Harlow, it started. As a friendly reminder to maintain peace and harmony within our shared environment, we ask that any use of the pond and surrounding areas adjacent to Clearbrook Shores be limited to the hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. as per our community guidelines. That little phrase, our community guidelines, sent a jolt of red through my brain. I reread it 3 times to make sure I wasn't missing something they weren't requesting. They were expecting compliance. I didn't respond. I figured they must have made a clerical mistake. Thought my property was part of their grid. Happens. I'd dealt with bureaucrats before. But a week later, I hosted a small gathering, just family and 2 of my co-workers. We set up some folding chairs by the dock, lit a small fire pit, and sipped beers as the sun went down. Nothing loud, nothing wild. Country music playing low from a Bluetooth speaker. It was barely 7:15 when the lights hit us. 3 people in reflective vests came traipsing down the gravel access path, all puffed up with authority. They had headlamps, radios, and one of them, a bald guy with a clipboard, was filming us with his phone. Evening, I said, standing up slowly. Can I help you? The clipboard guy didn't even bother introducing himself. We're HOA security, he said like that meant something. You're in violation of after-hours pond use per Clearbrook Shores noise mitigation ordinance. I laughed out loud. Not a chuckle, a full involuntary laugh that I had to bend over from. You think you can cite me on my own property? I asked. Son, this is private land. I'm not in your HOA. You've got no authority here. The woman beside him, blonde bob, oversized flashlight, stepped forward. Sir, we've received multiple complaints about activity on this pond after hours. We're documenting for escalation. Document this, I muttered and pulled out my phone. I wasn't about to argue. I called the sheriff's department right there in front of them and reported 3 individuals trespassing on private land at dusk. The clipboard guy stopped filming and gave the other 2 a quick nod. They backed off like roaches when the light comes on and scurried up the hill before the deputy even had time to answer my call. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about those vests, those flashlights, that smug sense of entitlement, and the way they'd backed off. Not panicked, but calculating, like they'd done it before and would do it again. The next morning, I dug through my documents. Deed, parcel map, tax sale certificate. Everything was in order. I owned every inch up to the old iron fence line. No easement, no shared access. No pond covenant, whatever the hell that would even mean. That's when I decided to install security cameras. Not because I was scared. I've lived through worse than HOA nonsense. But because something about the whole thing felt slippery. Like I was being sized up for something I couldn't quite see yet. And if they came back, I wanted footage. I mounted 3 cameras that weekend. 1 by the dock, 1 facing the back trail, and 1 up near the gate. Motion activated. Night vision. Cloud storage. If these clowns were going to start something, I wanted receipts, and I had a feeling they would. The next letter wasn't nearly as polite. It came in a stiff brown envelope with a bold red stamp reading Notice of Violation. Tucked inside was a 3-page document listing an infraction that I had supposedly committed, complete with time-stamped photos of me and my guests sitting by. The pond. The offense. Disturbance of community tranquility and unauthorized use of restricted water access outside approved timeframes. The fine? $480. I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in one hand and a coffee mug in the other, reading it twice just to confirm it wasn't a prank. But there was the HOA seal. There was a fake-ass Community Disruption Assessment Committee letterhead, signed by someone named Marlene York, Vice Chair of External Conduct Enforcement. That wasn't even a real job. My guests had been family and coworkers. Nobody was drinking excessively. Nobody was yelling. It was literally 6 people in a fire pit. And now I was being billed almost $500 for the privilege of existing on my own dirt past sundown. I didn't even bother calling them. I scanned the notice, fired it off to my lawyer, and went back to clearing brush like nothing had happened. A day later, my lawyer called. "You're not gonna like this," he said. "Try me." They're claiming that according to their internal map, the pond is categorized as a community access green zone. Internal? I nearly choked on my thermos coffee. Like, imaginary? He sighed. Their bylaws apparently include a map that predates your purchase. It was drafted when the developer first subdivided the neighborhood. They're claiming your pond was originally designated as shared passive recreation space. That's bullshit, I said. I've got the tax sale records. It was part of a foreclosed farm parcel. There's nothing shared about it. They know that, he said, but they're counting on you not having the original parcel data. Most people wouldn't. They really thought I was that stupid. That I wouldn't pull county records, dig up plats, check the GIS overlays. They didn't know I was an architect. I've been dealing with zoning snakes in City Hall for almost 20 years. I'd seen every dirty trick developers and HOAs use to carve up land like a damn birthday cake. That evening, I went down to the county clerk's office in person. I brought a copy of my deed, my parcel number, and my old college patience. It took an hour, but I walked out with certified copies of the original survey maps from the Faber Farm subdivision, dated well before Clearbrook Shores was even an idea. The pond. It was squarely inside what used to be Tract E, a standalone agricultural lot with zero mention of shared access or green space. In other words, it was mine. I made copies, scanned them on my cloud drive, and emailed my lawyer with the subject line, "Damn Karen." The next morning, I woke up to a message on my security app. Motion detected at 6:17 a.m. 3 figures in HOA vests again, standing just outside the fence line near the pond. One was holding a clipboard. Another had a laser measurer. The third was holding a phone filming my dock like they were about to list it on Zillow. I didn't go outside this time. I just watched from my porch as they loitered around for a few minutes, scribbled something down, and disappeared up the trail. 10 minutes later, a truck drove past the gate, paused, and then kept moving. Paranoid. Maybe, but I've been around long enough to know when someone's collecting intel for something bigger. These weren't just busybodies. This was a campaign. Later that day, the county GIS site updated. I don't check it religiously, but this time I was curious. Sure enough, in the community map overlay, the pond was now shaded light green. No legend, no reference. Just changed. I called the county mapping department. A young guy answered, probably just trying to pay rent and survive the workday. "Hey, I'm looking at parcel E 14B, I said. Just wondering when that green shading was added. Wasn't there last week? One sec, he said. I heard him clicking, then a pause. Oh, yeah. That came in from a third-party submission. HOA supplied map layers. They do that sometimes when they update their records. And that just goes through, without county review. Well, it's conditional, I guess? Jesus Christ, they were repainting reality. That night, I printed everything out. Both maps, the old one and the new one. Side by side, it was obvious. They were trying to rewrite the geography itself, counting on bureaucratic laziness and community apathy. I knew I had to start getting loud, not just legally, but visibly. If they were going to play games with lines on paper, I was going to give them a damn wall to stare at. I ordered a 100-foot banner mesh, custom printed in bold white letters. Private property not part of HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And just in case that was too subtle, I added below, this pond is not yours. It's shipped next week. And I had the perfect place to hang it. A few days after the banner went up, the tone changed. Until then, they'd tried to cloak their nonsense in neighborly concern and bureaucratic doublespeak. But now, it felt personal, a war of attrition, and the first real volley came by mail, again. This time, the envelope was thick. Inside was a glossy brochure printed like a damn timeshare pamphlet. Welcome to the Clearbrook lifestyle, it read, in an obnoxious serif font. Inside, a full-color map of the community with walking trails, bird-watching points, a community reflection lake, which, funny enough, was my pond, and a quote from some supposed resident saying, "Nothing beats an evening walk around our neighborhood. Lake. It's what sold us on this place." At the back of the brochure, just below a list of available homes with nature access, was a small, hard-to-miss signature. Approved by Karen McKellen, President, Clearbrook Shores HOA. I stood in my kitchen staring at that signature for a long moment. Karen, of course. I'd never met her in person, but I'd heard the name in conversations, on neighborhood posts, in whispered apologies from folks who seemed permanently nervous. She was the queen of Clearbrook, ruler of vinyl fences and painted mailboxes. And now, apparently, cartographer of my damn backyard. I decided it was time to do a little digging. First, I searched her name through the state real estate license database. Bingo! She was a broker, active, and worked for an agency that just so happened to specialize in exclusive HOA-managed developments. I found listings she'd written herself. Words like serene pond access and exclusive community nature space popped up in every description of the homes along the southern edge of the neighborhood, the ones facing my property line. She had been using my pond as a marketing feature. I called the real estate agency and asked, in my calmest voice, if Karen McKellen was still listing properties with shared pond access. The receptionist hesitated and asked who was calling. I gave my name and said I was the owner of the property in question. There was a long pause before she put me on hold. She never came back. I didn't need them to admit anything. I already had screenshots of half a dozen listings, all showing homes adjacent to scenic water features with common access. I printed every one of them, dated them, highlighted the phrases. This was no misunderstanding. It was a calculated fraud, selling proximity to land they didn't own and had no right to promise. That night, I finally got to meet Karen. I was by the dock, checking the security cam feed on my phone when I saw her. Mid-50s, platinum bob, yoga pants, white puffer vest, practically the HOA uniform. She was standing just outside my gate, hands on her hips, staring up at my banner like it had personally insulted her lineage. I walked up the hill with my flashlight off. "Evening," I said, casually enough. She didn't jump. She turned and gave me a tight smile, the kind that said, "I already decided who you are, and it ain't good." "Mr. Harlow," she said, "we need to talk." "That's funny," I replied. "All I've been getting from your people is mail and harassment." "I'm sure you're aware," she said, ignoring that the pond behind your property has historically served as a green zone for the community. It's featured in our development plans, and residents have come to expect access." "Access to my pond," I clarified. Karen smiled wider. "Community features don't always follow deed lines. There's precedent for easements and implied usage. I'm sure if we cooperate, we can reach a compromise." Now see, that's the moment I knew she was full of it. She wasn't threatening. Not yet. No, this was the soft pitch. The eye scratch your back phase. But I wasn't selling. Not an inch. "There is no easement," I said. "No shared usage. No compromise. You've got listings on Zillow lying through your teeth. You've got a fake map. You've got your people sneaking onto my land in the dark." Her expression barely twitched, but I saw it. Just a flicker in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to be this informed, or this stubborn. "I understand you're upset," she said, voice smoothing over, "but I'd hate for things to escalate. These disputes can be very expensive, messy, public." I took a step closer. "Oh, I want it to be public. That banner? That's just the beginning. You think I'm afraid of a court date? Lady, I built this house. You think I won't fight for it?" She blinked once, then gave me the exact same smile she came in with and turned on her heel. "I'll pass that along to the board," she said over her shoulder. "Do that," I called. Tell them to wear boots next time. The mud's deep on private property." She disappeared into the trees. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from her lawyer. It accused me of defamation, deliberate obstruction of community aesthetics, and, my personal favorite, antagonistic signage. I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a fish. Let them come. The lawsuit threat didn't scare me. What did bother me, though, was the sudden shift in how people started looking at me. I noticed it first at the feed store in town. I'd been picking up some pond treatment supplies, and the clerk, a kid I'd chatted with plenty of times before, seemed weirdly stiff. Wouldn't meet my eyes. Barely spoke. Then I noticed the flyer taped to the corkboard near the door. It was a photocopy of a Facebook post. No names, no HOA branding, just a blurry image of my dock and fire pit taken at dusk. Above it, in bold marker, "Some people think they own nature. What about our children? What about our community?" I stared at it for a good 30 seconds. Nobody said a word. On the way home, I checked the neighborhood Facebook page I usually avoided like the plague. Sure enough, there it was. A post by an anonymous account called Clearbrook Watchdog, filled with passive-aggressive venom. One resident has decided to barricade public access to our beloved pond, turning a shared space into a private club for his elite guests. Is that who we are as a community? The comments were worse. People asking if it was legal, others saying it felt wrong, even if it technically wasn't. One user flat out said, "I thought the HOA should report him to zoning. Who builds a fence around water like that?" I hadn't built a fence, not yet, but now I was seriously thinking about it. The next weekend, I had some friends over, nothing major, just a fish fry, some music, same as before. This time I noticed 2 people parked up the road. Didn't know them. They sat in their car, engine idling, cameras out. At first, I thought maybe they were realtors or bored teenagers. Then one of them got out and started taking pictures of my guests' license plates. That's when it stopped being annoying and started being threatening. I approached them, calm, hands out, smiling like a guy with nothing to hide. "Need something?" I asked. They didn't respond, just got back in the car and drove off. That night, one of my guests, Josh, a coworker, texted me, "Hey man, you sure your HOA is not crazy? Someone left a note on my windshield when I got home. Said I was aiding trespassing on community property." WTF? It wasn't just me they were going after now. They were trying to isolate me, and then came the paint. I woke up early Monday and went to check the dock, as I usually did. First thing I noticed was the smell. Sharp, chemical, oily. The kind of stink you feel in your teeth. The pond water was clouded, pale blue and thick. I spotted 2 dead sunfish floating belly up near the rocks. I followed the smell to the end of the dock, where I found the real punch. Someone had poured what looked like a gallon of deck stain or pigment into the water. Not just vandalism, a deliberate, targeted act. They wanted the pond to be unusable, a dead asset, a ruined symbol. I was past rage. I was in something colder. I pulled the SD cards from the security cameras, took screenshots of the motion alerts. Sure enough, 3 figures had come through the lower trail just after midnight. No masks. HOA vests, same ones from before. I packaged the footage, the photos, and samples of the pond water into a file and drove straight to the sheriff's department. No more warnings, no more polite denials. I filed 3 formal reports: criminal trespass, environmental damage, and harassment. The deputy took it seriously, said they'd open a file. I handed him a printed copy of the flyer from the feed store, too. "This," I said, "isn't just about property lines. These people are running a smear campaign while sneaking onto my land to poison it." I also contacted the EPA regional office. Maybe it was overkill, but I wanted every possible agency in the loop. If they were going to turn this into war, I was going to go nuclear. I wasn't done. My lawyer helped me draft a cease and desist letter. We sent it to the HOA board and specifically to Karen McKellen, accusing them of unauthorized surveillance, targeted defamation, environmental sabotage, misrepresentation of property in commercial materials. And just to twist the knife a bit, we attached screenshots of every listing that mentioned pond access, highlighted the lot boundaries, and CC'd the State Real Estate Licensing Board. I went home that night feeling oddly calm. There was mud all over my boots, my fish were dead, and the pond water still looked like windshield washer fluid. But I had a plan now, and Karen had no idea how loud I was about to get. After the cease and desist letter, I expected them to back off, at least a little. Normal people retreat when the law gets involved, but these weren't normal people. These were HOA loyalists, drunk on authority and emboldened by the illusion of control. Instead of de-escalating, they doubled down. It started with surveillance. And I don't mean cameras. I mean people. Unmarked cars idling down the road at all hours. Neighbors I didn't know suddenly walking their dogs along the tree line with their phones out. One woman even leaned over my gate to film the fire pit, pretending to stretch. The message was clear. "We're watching you." Then came the vehicles. My guests, especially ones with out-of-state plates, began finding their windshields photographed, their license plates logged. One evening, my buddy Dave got a warning notice on his dash. "You are parked adjacent to a restricted area. Repeated violations will result in action by the community board." There was no community board, not for me. But that didn't matter anymore. Few days later, someone pasted an official-looking document to my front gate. Heavy paper, county seal watermark. Big bold letters, Notice of Restricted Access, Section F Environmental Zone, Ordinance. It looked real, like something issued by a state agency, except there was no such ordinance. I checked the municipal code, county site, even called the zoning department to confirm. "Yeah," the clerk said, "we've been getting calls about that. It's fake." Whoever made it had gone to some effort. Matching font, seals, even a forged signature from a county official. It was a scare tactic, psychological warfare, designed to make guests hesitate, make me question what was real. But I wasn't questioning. I was documenting. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and the sheriff. Then I installed more cameras, hidden ones this time, and set up an automatic cloud dump every night. The next night, around 2 a.m., 3 people entered my property through the South Trail. I caught them on night vision, clear as day. They wore dark clothes but had reflective HOA armbands. One carried what looked like a small bucket. The next morning, the fish feeder had been pried open and filled with gravel. They weren't just trespassing, they were actively sabotaging my systems. That's when I lost my patience. I drove straight to the county recorder's office. I wanted a full copy of every parcel document ever filed on my land, going back to the subdivision phase, just in case there was some obscure clause or buried restriction they were trying to exploit. The clerk, a guy named Danny, printed the digital records and handed me a file folder. "Don't get many folks digging back to the original developer plats," he said with a nervous smile. I flipped through the copies looking for anything suspicious. And then I found it. A supplementary community overlay map filed 3 years ago, listing my pond area as green space, conditional shared access. The file was tagged as reviewed and accepted by a Jacob Melrose. That name sounded familiar. Later that evening, over a beer and a long phone call with my lawyer, it clicked. Jacob Melrose was the head of the county's GIS and parcel processing office. He'd signed off on dozens of updates to community maps over the years. And, more importantly, he was Karen's brother-in-law. That's when it made sense. The sudden changes to the GIS layers, the green shading that had appeared, the map the HOA used in their marketing. It was all rubber-stamped from inside the system. Karen didn't just make up a fake map. She had someone inside the building to validate it. That's how their scheme worked. Repetition, legitimization, slow creep of false records until they felt real. Until you looked like the trespasser on your own land. I was boiling. My lawyer said we couldn't accuse Melrose outright, yet, but we could request an audit of all parcel amendments involving Clearbrook Shores over the last 5 years. We could also submit a formal complaint for conflict of interest and abuse of authority. Meanwhile, HOA wasn't slowing down. They released another community notice, this time digital, sent via email to all residents. In it, they called me a disruptive element, accused me of interfering with communal harmony, and claimed I was undermining efforts to protect shared environmental resources. The kicker, they introduced a new witness, a man named Ray Linder, who claimed to have lived in the neighborhood since its inception. Ray stated he'd personally used the pond for fishing with neighborhood kids for over a decade, and that it had always been a shared space. Thing is, I'd never seen this guy before in my life. I checked his name, no property in Clearbrook, no utility records, no connection to the subdivision. He was a ghost. But I had seen his face. 3 years ago, I'd worked on a small cabin renovation project. We'd hired local extras to shoot promotional footage. One of them had played the friendly neighbor. That was Ray. They'd hired an actor to pose as a resident. That's when I knew for sure. This wasn't a turf dispute. This was a long con. And they were about to find out what happens when you try to steal from an architect who's got nothing left to lose, and every reason to burn your little kingdom to the ground. The summons came on a Tuesday. HOA was suing me. Officially, it was a civil action for obstruction of community access and defamation of association operations. The document was bloated with legal jargon, but the message was simple. They were trying to flip the narrative, make me the aggressor, paint me as a selfish land hoarder ruining their idyllic little suburban fantasy. They were requesting an injunction, demanding I take down the banner, cease denial of historical access, pay damages. I couldn't believe the nerve. My lawyer, Gina, read the documents, looked up at me, and just said, "They're betting on confusion. They want a judge who doesn't know land law." But we were ready. We countersued. Our claim? Trespass, vandalism, harassment, environmental damage, and willful misrepresentation of land for financial gain. And this time, we didn't just file the paperwork. We filed it with exhibits. The banner photos, the vandalism reports, the water testing results, the footage of the pond intrusions, and most importantly, the real parcel maps from the county archive, signed, certified, dated, showing the pond was never at any point designated for community use. We also included screenshots of every real estate listing that mentioned pond access or shared water amenities, each one linked back to Clearbrook Shores, all under Karen's name. They wanted to play courtroom games? Game on. The first court date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, HOA didn't let up. They posted a new update on the community board, this time accusing me of threatening the community with frivolous litigation and weaponizing legal systems to undermine harmony. They brought back their fake witness too, Ray Linder, and submitted a sworn affidavit. He doubled down, claiming he'd taught local kids how to fish on my pond since 2011. My lawyer and I sat there in silence after reading it. Then she picked up the document and said, "Want to have some fun?" Turns out, good old Ray had some credits online, a website, actor profile, corporate gigs, regional ad campaigns, including one in 2020 for a real estate video promoting family-friendly developments. He was holding a fishing rod, waving at kids. The exact same shot Clearbrook used in their HOA promo. Same face, same liar. Gina called in a favor with a private investigator, and within 48 hours, we had a deposition ready from the video production company confirming that Ray had never lived in Missouri. He was a contract actor hired to play a resident in a conceptual neighborhood simulation. We filed a motion to strike his affidavit and added perjury to our list of charges. At the preliminary hearing, the judge, a sharp older woman with zero patience for bullshit, asked one simple question after our side presented the actor evidence. Are you seriously asking this court to accept sworn testimony from a person who was literally hired to pretend to be a neighbor in your promotional video? Karen, sitting 2 rows behind her attorney, didn't blink, but her knuckles were white. The judge struck the affidavit and issued a warning. Any future submission of knowingly false testimony will result in immediate sanctions. HOA's lawyer tried to pivot, claiming it was an honest mistake, that Ray may have misunderstood the form, but the damage was done. Their credibility had been punched in the gut, in front of the press. And speaking of press, Gina had tipped off a local investigative journalist about the pond situation and the forged maps. The same day as the hearing, an article went live on the county news site, Private Pond or Public Lie. How one HOA tried to redraw reality. The article laid everything bare. The shady internal map changes, the false witness, the sabotage, the Melrose connection. It went viral in the area within hours. The comment section exploded. That night, I got a call from a neighbor, someone I'd never met in person. "I read the article," she said, voice low. "We didn't know. A lot of us didn't know. We were told the pond was always part of the community. I'm sorry." I didn't say much, just thanked her. The cracks were starting to show. HOA wasn't just fighting me anymore. They were bleeding from the inside. The next hearing was packed, not just with lawyers and board clerks, but with residents, neighbors, strangers. Some stood in the back, arms crossed, others with cell phones half raised. The The pond had gone viral. Everyone wanted to see how deep the rot went. Everyone wanted to see who was lying. Karen came in wearing white, not beige, not cream, white, like she was attending a garden party, not a court hearing where her entire HOA might be dismantled. Her lawyer looked like he hadn't slept in days. We submitted a motion to compel the county to release all parcel modifications involving Clearbrook Shores over the last 5 years. The judge approved it. Within days, Gina had a list of 42 entries: zoning notations, boundary overlays, and internal community integration requests. Almost all of them were stamped by one man, Jacob Melrose. Remember him? Karen's brother-in-law, head of the county GIS office, supposed to be neutral. He had personally approved the inclusion of my pond into a shared green zone, citing developer-proposed access improvements, despite there being no active developer since the subdivision went bankrupt in 2009. We cross-referenced every modification. Half of them were submitted by HOA board members under fake names. Several used a fake entity called Clearbrook Nature Preservation Trust, which, surprise, was registered to a P.O. box rented by Karen. Gina built a timeline. She printed it on a massive board and wheeled it into court like she was presenting a murder case. It showed the exact sequence: how Melrose approved falsified overlays, how Karen used them to boost home sale listings, and how the HOA quietly rewrote the rules of a neighborhood they didn't fully own. When she was done, the courtroom was silent. Karen didn't look so white anymore. The judge stared at the board like it was a confession. Then came the final blow, a statement from a whistleblower, a junior staffer from the recorder's office, who anonymously submitted an affidavit stating that Melrose had personally instructed him to suppress challenges to the Clearbrook maps and flag all requests from Parcel E14B for manual review, my property. They were actively sabotaging my filings. This wasn't just HOA overreach. It was corruption. The judge ordered a preliminary injunction against the HOA. No enforcement actions, no communications to residents about the pond, no further map modifications without third-party review. That was the legal win. But the real blow came 24 hours later. The County Times ran a front-page expose titled "Lines on a Map: How a Missouri HOA Tried to Steal a Pond." They had everything: the Melrose connection, the map fraud, the vandalism, even footage from one of my security cameras showing HOA. Volunteers sneaking around in the middle of the night. By the end of the week, the county suspended Melrose and launched an ethics investigation. The State Real Estate Board opened an inquiry into Karen's license. 3 residents publicly resigned from the HOA board. And a group of homeowners submitted a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. Karen, for her part, went quiet. No more newsletters, no more community updates, no more threats in my mailbox. But she wasn't gone yet. We still had a trial ahead. Still had charges on the table: document forgery, property damage, defamation, fraud. But now, I had something she didn't: the truth. And an audience. The trial lasted 3 months. Not because the facts were unclear, they weren't, but because the HOA fought like a cornered animal. They threw up every procedural delay they could muster. Claimed miscommunications, errors in filing, misinterpretation of community planning guidelines. At one point, their new attorney, Karen, had changed representation after the second hearing, argued that the perception of shared access is as legally relevant as access itself. The judge stared at him like he'd just spoken in tongues. We presented everything: every aerial photo, every GPS overlay, historical parcel records, video footage, water test results. Even the fake nature trust Karen had created, complete with records showing it had never filed taxes or conducted a single conservation activity. And then came the signature analysis. Remember that supposed consent document, the one they'd been waving around early on, claiming the previous landowner had agreed to turn the pond into shared space? Well, we tracked him down. His name was Henry Talbot. 82 years old, hard of hearing, sharp as a tack. He appeared in court via Zoom and, when asked if he had ever signed the HOA integration agreement, replied, "Hell no. I wouldn't give those vultures the time of day." We had his original signature from the land sale. We had the HOA's version. A forensic handwriting expert compared them and testified these were not signed by the same person. The HOA document is a forgery. That was it. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The silence said enough. Karen sat perfectly still. The verdict came 2 weeks later. The court found the HOA guilty of deliberate misrepresentation of property boundaries, forgery of legal documents, coordinated harassment and trespass, unauthorized environmental tampering, attempted civil fraud for financial gain, Karen. McKellen was sentenced to 8 years in state prison for document forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. The judge called her actions a sustained, calculated attempt to undermine the rule of law for personal and political gain. Jacob Melrose was terminated from the county and faced federal investigation. His testimony collapsed under questioning, and emails recovered from his office showed coordination with Karen on map alterations. He's still under grand jury review. The HOA was forcibly dissolved. The remaining board members were fined and stripped of any right to serve on a neighborhood association again. They were also required to send written disclosure letters to all homeowners, alerting them that prior marketing claims about shared access had been legally discredited. And me. I finally had peace. But I didn't just take the win and disappear. With Gina's help, I worked with the county to place a permanent conservation easement on the pond, legally protecting it from any future HOA nonsense, development, or public access claims. Then I did something that, honestly, I never saw coming. I opened a portion of the shoreline, about 1 acre with a dock and bench, to disabled veterans and first responders by personal invitation only. No noise, no lights, no fishing tournaments, or 4th of July chaos. Just quiet space for people who needed it, people who earned it. The rest? Still private, still mine. One last thing. I had a new sign installed at the gate, big enough to read from the trail, reflective lettering, bolted into concrete. It reads, Clearbrook Shores HOA, dissolved by court order, pond access, denied, permanently, private property, trespassers will be prosecuted. And just below it, in smaller font, Karen lied.